stunning new report from the Associated Press claims that Donald Trump was seriously considering a Venezuelan invasion in late August of 2017. There was actually a meeting in late August where sanctions on Venezuela were discussed. And at the end of the meeting was sort of wrapping up. And Donald Trump asked his top aides who were around him, why can't we just invade Venezuela? And according to the senior administration official who spoke about this meeting, people in the room were stunned, which is a common theme when Donald Trump speaks. Then Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and then National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, both of whom, interestingly, are no longer working for Trump, immediately started to explain to Trump why invading Venezuela is not a good idea. And as the conversation is described, McMaster and other people in the room kind of took turns explaining to Trump the different reasons why it's a bad idea, how it could backfire, how it could completely squander the support that has been built among other Latin American leaders to push back against the Venezuelan regime for going down the dictatorial path. And apparently the experts in the room didn't really dissuade Donald Trump, because the next day Trump was talking to friends about the, quote, military option in Venezuela to remove Nicolas Maduro from power. And then Trump still kept going with it the following month in September, when he spoke to 4 different Latin American leaders, including the Colombian president. And all 4 of those leaders said to Trump in abundantly clear terms, yeah, we don't want to use the military option in Venezuela. And this is how volatile the guy is, right? On a whim, he's talking about the sanction solution seems complicated. What about just invading Venezuela? And even his top advisors with relatively significant experience, although maybe not Rex Tillerson, can't talk him out of it. And I really want to talk it through, because if you're a regular viewer of the David Pakman Show, you probably know that I don't support the Venezuelan regime. And there's this strain of the left. It's a sort of what I call a Leninist strain that loves Hugo Chavez and loves Nicolas Maduro and seems to think that Venezuela is just great and that these are truly progressive populist leaders. I'm not in that group, right? I don't support authoritarian dictators. I don't care whether their rhetoric sounds progressive. Their implementations are total strongman authoritarianism, and I don't support that, and no leftist should. That being said, an American invasion of Venezuela is an obviously disastrous idea. The United States is one of the reasons that so many Latin American countries have people wanting to come to the United States, legally or illegally. And I've talked before about how American foreign policy towards Latin America can either drive people to try to come to the United States illegally, or it can improve conditions in their home countries so that people will be more likely to want to stay. And an American invasion of Venezuela would only perpetuate the conditions that make people want to come to the United States in the first place. That's number one. Now, number two, look at the history of American interventions in Latin America. Absolute, unmitigated disaster. And if the Maduro regime is to be pushed out of power, and I want it to be pushed out of power because it's an abomination, it needs to be with as little American involvement as possible. I want Maduro out, right? Maduro and Chavez have been atrocious spectacles in Venezuela. But a U.S. military-led intervention is not what should remove Maduro from power. And to circle back to the Trump foreign policy aspect of this, remember that we were told by the pro-Trump crowd and actually by the anti-Hillary crowd, which are not always the same groups, they're overlapping groups in some way. We were told Hillary, if she wins, will start a ton of wars, but Trump wouldn't. I'm asking you now, what military intervention has Trump opposed as president? He's been in favor of a ton of them. He's been talked out of it by aides or by foreign leaders. Syria, were it not for the Russia factor, we might already be way more involved in Syria. Iran, if you want to do something in Iran, certainly you've got to get out of that Iran deal, which Donald Trump is doing. Venezuela, okay, it seems like he was talked out of it. North Korea, if his deal backfires, how quickly will the military option be back on the table? I'm not seeing that Donald Trump is far less likely to get involved in wars than Hillary Clinton would have been.
You know, I just blame this statement on Trump's incompetence, right? Because he doesn't do the homework, he doesn't read the briefings every day,
right?
But he still wants to contribute to the conversation. So when his advisors are talking about what we can do, you know, economically or militarily, he just is left out of the conversation because he doesn't really know those intricacies.
You think that's what's going on?
Yeah, so he says, well, why don't we just invade the country?
It might be useful if he read those daily briefings. Like maybe there would be something communicated there which would leave him with an understanding of why it's not a great idea to think about just invading. But again, this is the guy who wasn't totally sure why it wasn't a good idea to consider using nuclear weapons on Europe during the presidential campaign. So it
Yeah,
does
or
seem like he has this tendency.
I think he asked 3 times why we couldn't use nuclear weapons against North Korea. You
Yeah.
have to explain that to him 3 times?
Yeah, it should only take twice, two explanations, right, before a normal person gets it.